Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to answer a very interesting musical question, which really has been asked a million times since, the past century and a half or so. Is Wagner's music toxic in some way? Now, Wagner is the most controversial figure possibly in all of Western music because he was such a vile and revolting human being. And there's a question which many of you have mentioned or brought up, which is, does some of that vileness leach into his music? And I have to say straight off, the answer is no, it does not. And I don't really think you can make the argument that it can, because music doesn't do things like that, in my view anyway. But the topic came up because I did a video recently on how I discovered Wagner. And I thought it was a very innocent, straightforward discussion of one person's journey through music and coming to grips with it, because I think Wagner is a marvelous composer. I really do. I have my criticisms. I don't worship Wagner. I don't think he can do no wrong. I'm not a cult member. But, greatness is greatness. You can't argue with that, right? His significance is unquestioned, but forget the significance part. Is it enjoyable? Can you love it? Yeah, sure. It just took me a long time. So I talked about that process. One of the wonderful things about talking about cult composers, Wagner and Bruckner and people like that, is that the loonies come out of the woodwork and I get to ban them from my channel, which elevates the discourse. So I have no problem with that. I really don't. And predictably, some of the loonies came out of the woodwork. And it was fun and I banned them. And so as far as I was concerned, it was a useful exercise in more ways than one. But why do they come out of the woodwork? What is going on with these people? And why does that lead then to the assumption that there's something about Wagner's music that's like doing it to these people? Well, I gave the matter some thought, and I just thought we could chat about that a little bit because, here's the deal. There are two ways to take Wagner's music. You could just take the music as it comes, qua music, or you can drink the Kool-Aid and go in for the whole cult thing, which encompasses far more than the music. It's Wagner's writings, which are just ridiculous for the most part, except when he's writing about music, most of the time. The practical value and performance of music. There he's on firm ground because he was a musician. When he talks about politics and philosophy and all that stuff, he's just the biggest bullshitter that ever lived. And the fact is that Wagner wrote more crap than he did music. There's more literature that he wrote, stuff that he wrote, his writings, which are just, why anyone bothers with that stuff, I have no clue. I've read them. I have read them. I'm telling you, you are wasting your time. It's part of that joy of pseudo-intellectual philosophizing that a lot of people, like to get into when they want to get behind the music. There is nothing behind music. Music is music. Let's just keep that straight right there. So yes, there are people who are Wagnerians because of the person, the persona, and the total package of everything he did. And there are people who like Wagner, like me, because I love music. And I love great music. And Wagner wrote great music. His music is warm. It's passionate. It's grandiose. It's egomaniacal, megalomaniacal. It's all of those things. It's romantic. It's the romantic explosion of uninhibited everything. That's what Wagner represented. That idea of being completely, totally enthralled to your own inspiration. And that idea, that philosophical concept, appeals to some people, and it has a negative effect on people who are revolting people, like Wagner was a revolting person. And there is no shortage of those people. And like attracts like. They gravitate. Someone had this atrocious comment. It was really sort of nasty, but they're now banned. It doesn't matter. But they said that they took horrible objection to my saying that Wagner was the Donald Trump of music, and I stand by that. I stand by it because both of them have this ability to give otherwise normal people who would rather, most of the time be in control of their negative impulses, permission to express them, justification for expressing them. And again, is that Wagner's fault? No, it only applies to himself. How people take what he did and interpret it and what they feel that justifies in terms of their own behavior. Well, that's not Wagner's fault. It's not Donald Trump's fault either, quite frankly. But there are people who represent certain impulses or the freedom to express certain impulses. And some people take that as permission. And that is a human failing, a very human failing. It's what creates cults. It's what creates, the cult personality cult. It creates horrible, awful things in human history. These figures are toxic. Yes, they are. They're toxic. But is their music toxic? Donald Trump's not a musician. Wagner, is his music toxic? Of course not. Of course not. It's wonderful. It's delicious. It's terrific music. Whether you like it or not, it's great music. So there you go. But I really find it fascinating, that these people do feel, especially under cover of the internet, where you can be anonymous, in addition to being vile and hate-filled and completely nuts, and you can just express this stuff, and you think that you are defending your hero. And let's be clear about that too. Wagner does not need any of his defenders to defend him. No great composer does. And I suspect even that Wagner, who, remember, for all of his anti-Semitism and all the stuff that he did, had Herman Levy conducting his music. He was nothing if not hypocritical and pragmatic when it came to things like that. But my point is that I don't think Wagner would like these people either. I really don't, because it's an aspect of that kind of megalomaniacal personality that it never gets beyond narcissism. It never gets beyond himself. He would take adulation. He would take things from these people. But would he like them? Would he stand up for them? Would he welcome them into his circle? No, probably not. He would treat them like the rather spineless and sad and pathetic creatures that they actually are. People who need something to grasp onto, and they're doing it not because they're defending Wagner. They're doing it because it gives them the opportunity to express their own misery and bile and vituperation in what they think is an acceptable or justified way. And there is never an excuse for that kind of behavior. Never, ever, ever. So, where does that leave us without berating this point and flogging a dead horse? My approach to these things is rather different. Alex Ross wrote a marvelous intellectual history of Wagnerism. I don't know if you've seen it. It's really a tremendous piece of work and very, very thoughtful. And he deals with high culture, philosophy, a lot of very abstract concepts on a very, very high level of intellectual probing. And it's interesting because he's a brilliant guy. He really is. And I enjoy reading his work. I'm just saying that because I deal with Wagnerism on the lowest possible level. That is the interaction with the public, with normal people, with your average daily cranky old Wagnerite person who has this axe to grind with humanity, and anybody who he thinks is, or they think, she thinks, anyone who they think is challenging or in some way questioning the universal truths that they hold dear. It's the same thing as with religious cultists, because one of the things that I've experienced in my peregrinations through the world of music criticism is it's always the good reviews that cause the most problems, never the bad ones. You can trash something utterly, and someone might say, you're trashing it, or they may get a little upset. But, basically they sort of suck it up and deal with it, maybe because it's just so straightforward. It's the equivocation that makes people crazy. It's when you say, okay, Wagner's a great composer, but I don't like this, or he has this defect, or I think, I question the universal validity of everything that he did. That makes people crazy. That's the thing that gets them. And you find that at a very, very interesting level in this kind of a forum. So Wagner's music isn't toxic. The answer is no. Wagnerians, however, very well may be toxic, just as Wagner himself was toxic. A loathsome human being who appeals to other loathsome human beings. And that is the cross he has to bear, because his music will forever be associated with vile people and awful behavior. It's not that the music creates it. He did. He did personally, not the music. Now, let's keep those things separate. I really believe we need to, because there's a lot of fabulous music to be enjoyed in Wagner if you can separate the music from the man. And I believe that we need to do that often. Not always. There may be exceptions. There are exceptions to everything. It's a nuanced thing, and we have to take each case as it comes. But on the whole, we are much better off for loving Wagner's music and loathing the person, and those who think that the music gives them license to be as loathsome as Wagner himself was. What a terrible, terrible notion that is. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.